in front of you, you have sticky notes and a Sharpie. And what we're going to do is schedule management is the general topic. The topic of what you want to talk about, any subtopics, anything having to do with schedule management. You have probably 2 or 3 sticky notes apiece. You may use them all, or just put one or maybe none. When you're done with it, we want to stick them up on that board. Then we're going to vote on the top ones from there. We're probably looking at 3, like Kinga said, or maybe 4. And what we do is we'll discuss them in 10-minute time boxes. And after 10 minutes, if we want to keep talking about that one, we'll do another 10 minutes. If you want to choose the next one in line, we'll choose the next one in line. But it's a very interactive discussion. It's going to blow by really fast. But what we really want to be able to do is listen to what it is you have to say, because everyone's got experience in schedule management to some degree or another, and there's also something you may want to know having to do with schedule management that you can ask questions of. So it's a very interactive discussion. I think you'll enjoy it. So at this time, write down whatever subtopics are of interest to you, 1 per sticky note when you get down to the ones that are left, or if you have none left, then you go and stick them up on the board.
Well, in our role, we just hear a lot about what different companies are using for scheduling tools and how they are utilizing them. So I was just looking for some information. I've heard everything just this week from MS Project to Teams. Some people are using that for scheduling, whether it's ServiceNow. Even just this week, I think those are the 3 major tools that I've heard. So I didn't know if anybody's landed on something, using something in a unique way that might be interesting to share with some of our other customers that we're supporting. So,
at Stryker, we use a combination of MS Project and ServiceNow. In ServiceNow, we keep track of the high-level stage we're in. You know, what time we were supposed to start that stage of the project, what time we're supposed to end, and we track how close we are to that date. But that's for management to see how close we are to being on track.
okay.
But the day-to-day things we track in Microsoft Project.
Okay. So using 2 different tools for 2 different types of visibility?
Right.
Okay.
Why can't you use project? I guess I'm not familiar with ServiceNow. What is it that ServiceNow does that project
We
doesn't?
do high-level reports for leadership out of ServiceNow.
Okay.
So we could do the same thing out of MS Project, but for some reason,
Okay.
at a high level, somebody higher than me decided that they were going to use
So
ServiceNow.
formatting or something is preferred.
Right.
I don't know. Okay.
I'm just thinking it's probably a simpler graphic or something, because in MS Project you can get really complicated and
Yeah.
detailed,
Right.
but
Okay.
maybe that's more like a high-level snapshot.
And they match that to financials too in ServiceNow. So
Okay.
it's they do, like we do track our hours against the project in ServiceNow.
Okay.
So if you're working on the project, you can put 5 hours on this project, 6 hours on this one, across the board. All the projects are listed in ServiceNow.
Are you using the project portfolio suite at Stryker?
Yes.
Okay, that explains tying the financials.
We work for an IT consulting company. We don't even have 100 people. So while we actually consult on ServiceNow, it's one of our biggest service offerings. We don't use it in-house because we just aren't the right target market for it. We're just too small. We today use actually a homegrown scheduling system that was built by one of our engineers. He coded it like crazy, and it literally kind of looks like a Tetris board with a bunch of colors. And then we use Smartsheet for the actual task tracking with project management, and we had another engineer, homegrown, built a time tracking system. But all of those systems are kind of out. None of them are integrated. So right now we're literally in the middle of an implementation for MavenLink, which we aren't live yet, but so far I could not recommend them more. It is a all-in-one PSA tool, so it's anything from scheduling to project management, time tracking. The reports that you can build out of there for people's utilization and things like that are just incredible. So I'm not I'm not in it day to day quite yet because again, we're still implementing
Sure.
it right now. But their scheduling tool looks at, you can build skill sets for engineers or obviously whatever company you're working with.
Sure.
You can build their skill sets, so you can actually filter on skill set, you could filter on certifications, you can filter on, these people like to work in California time zones. I mean, you can basically build whatever you need to so that when you are scheduling a major project, you can filter on that and only show the people who'd be able to do the project. And then it shows people's utilization automatically. So if I were to schedule somebody for 80 hours over 4 weeks, it automatically shows that they're 50% utilized.
Okay.
And then obviously as I continue scheduling them on other projects, it'll up that percentage to show, they're 80% utilized. And then what's nice with Maven Link too is you can get more granular within the project as well. So the overall scheduling system, it just obviously looks at utilization, but within the project itself, you can schedule specific tasks for specific days, specific hours. You can say a task is supposed to take 40 hours and schedule it, 8 hours a day for a week. And then once they submit that time card, you can actually see the realistic time against that. So if it went over or if it went under.
Is that a cloud-based system?
Yes.
Or- Yeah.
What's the name of it again?
Maven Link?
Yeah, and the company culture and responsiveness has been out of this world. Like, it's great.
It's been great, and it's I think tons of different sizes of companies can use it. Again, I also can't recommend ServiceNow more for bigger companies because
Yeah.
that's what we consult on. It's one of our biggest money makers, really, and but for the smaller companies, I saw a lot with Kimball. We kind of interviewed them. We ended up going with Maven Link just for culture standpoint. They just seem to have basically everything we've been looking for PSA. So.
That's awesome.
Is Maven Link a cloud-based system?
Mm-hmm.
How's it been to work with you said you couldn't recommend them enough, but when working with their people, and what's the maintenance cost on that? Is it user licenses?
It's user license based. So right now, it was honestly so we looked at Excello too. I don't know if you guys have been looking at that. So we looked at Excello, Kimball, trying to think of a few others, Tenrocks, Workfront. I mean, there's obviously hundreds, but the implementation cost obviously depends. That they usually do like a 3-month implementation. It's just a fixed fee. They come on site for a workshop with you, and then the licensing cost for our company is I think running us $20K a year, and that's with like 50 engineers and 10 like full-time collaborator admin licenses that can obviously do more of the robust.
Do they have different levels of licensing?
Yes.
Like project manager license
Yes.
as opposed to a user license?
Yes.
Okay. Report license?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
What's the reporting capabilities of it? Have you been?
It's incredible. So they have homegrown reports already in there. So and I'm a reporting nerd. I am obsessed with data, and I could work in spreadsheets and reports all day long. The reports that I've seen, I mean, not only even from a status reporting perspective, when right now our status reports are literally like we could either have somebody manually retype everything they did in a week and send it to a customer in a Word document, or we can try to like export something out of Smartsheet, and none of it's very clean. Maven Link they already have like custom reports built in there where you can say, here are all the tasks that were literally marked complete, here are the ones that are upcoming, here are the ones that were marked as issues, here are the ones that are running late, and then from a more robust reporting standpoint. So I'm accountable for like gross margin for our delivery company and our revenue and everything. And I'll be able to see, as long as our engineers are tracking their time, which we know is, at least for us, is one of the biggest challenges, we can see whether it's a fixed bid project or a T&M project, what their utilization is, if it's a fixed bid project, we could see, what would we have made margin-wise had this been T&M.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to articulate it. I'm still getting into like how to build the reports and learning how to do it, but they build them for you as well. Lots of just anything you could think of, anything that I've been able to think of, they have a report on it or they can build it.
Is it graphical?
Mhm.
Like pretty.
Doesn't look like 1990.
No,
Very
and
That's what I was like.
So right now, so we use Dynamics CRM, so a lot of our
Okay.
reporting comes from there. And I mean, honestly, I don't want to say anything bad about dynamic CRM, but they're reporting that literally the colors change every time you rerun the graph. It's not consistent. It doesn't look it's not very user friendly.
Yeah.
Maven Link, it looks pretty, which matters.
Right, it does.
It looks pretty.
More
It
and
looks
more.
like data that you actually want to read and play with.
How well does it work on a mobile device?
So they're still building an actual mobile app, but their mobile site, so far from what I've seen, works very well. And then on a tablet, so far it works very well. There are certain things with reporting don't work very well because in part their reports are so robust. There's
Yeah.
so much data to look at that looking at it on a tiny screen doesn't really make
Doesn't
sense
make sense,
anyway.
yeah.
But when it comes to tracking time and just looking at like project information, it's been great so far.
Okay. Cool.
Is that, because I'm not a PM, right? Is that how most PMs want to see that data, like from a reporting perspective, just different size, like that granular from a scheduling perspective? I mean, I know like in a services organization, right, we'd want to have stuff that big, but I'm wondering about at like a project based.
I think it really depends on who's looking at the data.
Mhm.
Okay.
If it's an internal audit, then you probably would base it on your KPI. Usually,
Yeah.
before you are going to measure for something, you figure out, well, what are we trying to find out?
Uh-huh.
You figure out those KPIs for that, and then you build a report based on
Based
that.
on that.
At least that's how we typically try to do
Mhm.
it.
Okay.
But if you're trying to present it for like a customer
Yeah.
or a different department or executives and things, then you think of basically what they need.
What they need it.
Because I know for executive level, usually
Sure.
they want as little information as possible,
Yeah.
So, or they want as much, depending on
Mhm.
if they ask for it, so.
So the thought here was just, we've got a lot of projects, I can schedule them out, I'm the only program manager at my company. But now I'm starting to come in and everyone's like, because not only do I have my projects that I'm running, there are other projects in the plant, right? I've got engineers, I've got materials sourcing, all sorts of things. So it's just like, what have you guys found in order to kind of mix the different, projects across the company, and try to prioritize those. I prioritize my own projects, I know their value,
Sure.
but it's mixing in with other areas and departments. That's kind of where that one's coming from.
Jeff, you guys do that project process that you guys do at
Yes.
GRCC is interesting, maybe.
That's for prioritizing projects more than
Oh, okay.
anything else. I think this one has more to do with resources.
Okay.
But I'm happy.
Either or though. Yeah.
Okay, well, I was talking to Heather about it. What we do is, we prioritize projects, or project requests, 9 projects. In fact,
Yeah.
the language we use is very deliberate, because when you say it's a project, people expect, okay, when are you gonna do it?
Yes.
So, it's a project request, and the only time it becomes a project is when it's, saying, yes, we're gonna do this, and we call it a project. But everywhere along the way, every step of the way, it's about a 7-step process to prioritize it. We try to kill them any chance we can get, because if it can be killed, it should. And if it can't, then it needs to be done. So it starts out with a request process, a simple form, a few questions, so we know that you're interested in doing something. As soon as we get that, we send them another form. These are done with Google Forms to get a business case. And then once we have a business case, we do a research meeting, bring our experts with us to the meeting, take the time to ask a lot of questions having to do with, basically, you look at the 6 constraints of any project. We ask questions about time, schedule, cost, quality, risk and opportunity, and resources. And we ask them with their business case. If the business case is weak, we start to killing it right away. But if it's strong, we ask them all the other things. And all these questions we ask are really tied into a rubric that gets used later to determine if this project is worth
That's what I
doing.
was thinking, like you score
Do
them,
like a score.
right?
We do score them, but we haven't scored it yet. So then we take that information and we send it back to the people that were in the meeting. And the people that were in the meeting say, all right, did you agree with the way this research was done? Is this accurate? Any changes are going to be made, but we want to first define and make sure it's accurate. Once we have agreement on it, then we send it forward to the IT managers. The IT managers we'll have a meeting with them. We type, because everyone has so many damn meetings in a day, so we take a piece of a meeting they have scheduled every week, which is the director's meeting. And we do probably 3 or 4 of these requests at a time. And we send all the information to them a week ahead of time so they have time to meet with their teams to getting information. Then we ask how much time is it going to take, how many hours we're looking at, if there's costs, who's paying for it, all those things. But it's about 10 minutes per project request. And then we write up an executive summary based on that information. And then we send them on to the CIO. And the CIO will use a rubric. Now the way we did this rubric is we took the mission, vision, values, and ends of the college and said, what is this? This is what we're supposed to be doing. Any changes we make should affect us in a positive way. So we have that, plus we build in the constraints, such as there's questions in there in the rubric about how much money is this going to cost, and we have different degrees of how much it's going to cost or how much it's going to save, and how much time is it going to take to, if we build this thing, to maintain it, you know, and do we have the resources to maintain it? What's it going to take to do that? Those kind of questions. But there's really 8 different checks in the rubric that have to be done. So the CIO scores it, and then once he has all of them, all this gets decided at the executive level. So we have 4 vice presidents, and we have a president. One of the person who's the CIO, he's a vice president. 90% of what he brings to them and the way he scored it, they all agree with, typically. And then they fight over the last 10%. And that's the negotiation has to occur. But once they decide on what it is, and they agree to the rubric, and this is a key thing, if you're going to have a rubric, what we did is we scored some project requests ahead of time. And when we came up with a rubric, and I scored the same project request as my boss did, and we came up with plus or minus 3 points of each other. Did the same thing at the executive level. All the vice presidents took the same project request, they scored it, and they came up with plus or minus 3. So they agreed to the scoring. That's key. If they don't agree with the tool, they're going to circumvent any chance they can get.
Yeah.
So once we had it scored, and we had a rubric that everybody agreed with, then that's what we've used. We use Microsoft Project to facilitate the rubric. I'm not a big fan of Project Server all the time, but the business intelligence piece of that works really good. I built a rubric into it, and it helps manage all the different requests. So it becomes more like a portfolio manager more than anything else. And then once they've decided on it, we have a capacity of 15 projects, and we put 5 in reserve. Anything below that line of 20 is flushed out. And if they have a problem with it, they talk to their vice president. Each vice president gets 1 override. And we've only used probably 3 overrides in the last 5 years. But if you're going to override something, you got to take something out of it. You can't just put something on top of what's already there. We've made it very clear that resource capacity is finite. You know, we're not supermen and women, and we're not going to do extra hours and create money out of thin air and do all that kind of stuff. This is what it is, and this is the size of the box that you fit in. And if it doesn't fit, then it doesn't go in. Yes?
Question, what percentage would you say of the projects overall are internal versus external? I don't know how you guys.
Well, where I work at, everything's basically internal because I work at the community college. But I can answer that also of how many times we have to use outside vendors. And a lot of almost every project request we get initially, it ties to our enterprise applications, which is the PeopleSoft system we use. There's always some kind of data that's got to come out of there for a project. And then infrastructure is probably second. And then customer support, security touches on a lot of things. Then media has their own thing that they do. And then we have academic applications. Probably academic applications, infrastructure, and enterprise apps do most of it. There's a lot of work that we do on our own, but if there's a system that's being bought, I'll give you an example of a request we have right now. The people in the enrollment center want to have an orientation system. We currently have our online orientation built in Blackboard, which is learning management system. They want to have something, I think it's 60 grand to buy it. I think it's probably 20 grand a year to maintain it or something. And right out of the gate, it's going to score low on cost unless they can, because there's a cost one, but also how much is it going to save us or how much it's going to provide us, how many students is it going to help, and to what degree. If it balances out somewhere in that way, then it could go through. So when we go out to outside vendors, we have certain rules we have to follow as a public institution, and if it's over a certain amount, it's got to go into a bid cycle and bid package, and so it gets washed through a lot of different things. And the more complex something becomes, the more time it takes, the more it affects on the rubric too, because it's gonna affect all the other projects
Sure.
requested and that get approved and the ones that are currently in progress. So we look at the whole thing, because it's like, okay, you may have made it through all these gates, but doing this thing is gonna conflict with something else that's more important or it's already in progress and we've already sunk, 50, 100 grand into it. And we're not, we can't do it, or we can't do it now. Yes, sir.
What's the turnaround time on that process for prioritizing and ranking and selecting?
We start the process out, and what we did is we aligned the process with the budget request cycle.
Okay.
We have a mid-year budget request cycle that goes from November to the beginning of December, and then we have the budget request cycle, which overlaps, which is November to the end of February. So actual requests have to be made within that timeline.
So you have a lot of foresight into projects that are coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, because
Okay.
almost every project, because part of it, they're gonna have budgets, but not everything has a budget, but their actual planning happens during those budget meetings. So again, don't like meetings, so we try to utilize the meetings that are there and get the discussion, so we have a request timeline. And the request is 5 o'clock on Friday, March 1st was the deadline. 5:01, they get shut down. Well, this year it didn't, because we forgot, it was about Sunday when it got shut down, but we didn't have any other requests. So we had, but after that, you can't get one in. And we've had people, the procrastinators, and then we've always said, hey, it's months away, it's not a big deal. It's like, get it in now. But we've shut people down. It's like, no. Well, this is important. I was like, yeah, go tell your vice president and get the other 4 to agree. That's how it works. If you keep it at the top, you kill all that noise in between. Because we used to have it, or was at the other level. Do you want to keep talking about this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
I will, let me just reset this real quick. Okay. That's working. Where was I? Oh, if you, by putting it in that time frame, and then after that, we've done the research as much as we have on the ones that came in before the deadline, and then right now we usually have a big push in the last week because people are finishing up their budget meetings. I think by nature, people just take their time and they procrastinate, so we know that's coming. We had, I think, 12 requests in the last week, and we had 10 the week before, and we had 32 total. So we had 10 up until that point. So then the research meetings occur and all that process, but what we try to do is get it all done, all the requests to our boss, who's the chief information officer, by April. And we've already had the feasibility meetings and all that, and then he goes through and scores them. He doesn't want to see until he has at least 10. But what's really nice about projects in terms of scoring it, he can see them all at once and he can check them off. He reads through all the research. We put all that stuff in the project for him to see. And then the toughest part of all this, really, in terms of scheduling, is getting all the executives to be in one room at once. So it's basically 5 people, but they meet once a month. Actually once a week, but once a month they'll discuss this thing. And if we don't hit that once a month, we got to wait till the next one. And then sometimes even when it's scheduled, oh no, I can't because I got this other thing. So that's been the tough part. But they do get it done, and usually by June we have our answers. And our fiscal year is July 1st. And it's always for the next fiscal year, so we get it done before the fiscal year. There's some requests that we've had in the past, it's better to get it started before the fiscal year if we know it's going to go through, so we kick those off. But then that's the first part of prioritization. The second part of prioritization is, okay, now that we know which ones are doing, IT is the ones who determine what order they're done in. Because we lay them all out and say, all right, here's what we already have in progress, and here's what we got, and we start ordering. Because something may have been number 1 in terms of prioritization, but it's probably number 10 in what order we're going to do it, based on time, resources, how much skill we got to have to get this done, when the vendor's going to be ready, if we haven't chosen a vendor yet, all those different things. So it's that kind of prioritization. It's 2 steps. But the first part is usually the hardest part, figuring out what it is we're going to do, and then how we're going to do it, when we're going to do it. That's done second.
I really like how you guys did it at Cigna in the individual segment, because Cigna is divided into different segments and of groups you work with. So on the individual side, if you don't, like, every department has their own small budget to implement smaller projects, but for the larger one, we have a PMO, office that kind of distributes money to whatever projects they have. And they have a set budget they cannot go over. And some of the larger ones are kind of scheduled, because sometimes they don't only finish within a year, they could last, up to 5 years. So they have the set money for it. And then whatever else, it's kind of allocated within that year. And it feels like it's the smaller projects, so we have it on the broker side, sometimes they come up with, hey, this would be like a reporting. It would be really good to see all our book of business in a certain way. Could you please get this done? And very often you have to put it, so there is an official request, you have to do it. Why, justify, why do you want it, how much you think it will cost, and what's going to be an effect. But it feels like anytime a smaller group comes up with an idea, it never gets implemented. I've seen so many projects put on hold because they don't have a strong VP behind it, or they have a set budget and they know they cannot implement everything. Or the biggest project that takes 5 years takes all the money that was budgeted for that year, so everything else is put on hold. So I like how you guys did it at GRCC, where you have it in prioritizations, because sometimes people let's request it. Why request it? You will not get approved. I'll never get this done. So almost you have to go and scramble to get money somehow, somewhere, to get your project done. Because if you try to put it in the official request, 90% it will be on hold.
And we,
It's very discouraging.
one of the big goals of doing it this way too is we want to be able to meet people's expectations. There's nothing more disappointing in being told that, yes, we're going to do this for you, and you tell people we're going to get this done, tell the people that this project's deliverables are going to affect, that we're going to get it done, and then someone else comes along and says, well, this is more important, and they step on you, and then the person who needed the thing, well, you get set aside, and it probably happens multiple times. And prior to us setting it up this way, that's what was happening, because we had anybody can request anything anytime they wanted, no matter when. And it was chaos.
Whoever
And
shouts
they'd
the
have these
loudest.
monthly
Yeah.
meetings, and there was this project prioritization team, but it was 13 people, and there were basically middle-level managers and maybe a couple of deans, and they would sit around and they'd prioritize stuff the last month, they meet again the next month, and more stuff would come in, and they got to re-level everything, and they're sitting
Yeah.
around voting and all this stuff, and it was nuts.
See, that's where we're at right now.
And it's
like
awful.
everyone wants to weigh in
And you can't have it. You gotta consolidate it into the top people, because what's happening is if all those people agreed, if you can get them to agree,
Yeah.
if they all agreed, then someone who's just a little bit higher than them can come along and say, nope, I want this one instead,
Yeah.
because they all work for that person. So one year before we changed it, we had a god-awful number of projects. They were called projects, by the way, and there were 60 of them, maybe more, and we didn't have that capacity. The 15 projects we did that year were all overrides from one person who was the provost. She says, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want that. And they had nothing to do with all the stuff we'd already researched, already started doing, spent money on. It was a big waste. So when we had a chance to change it, when we had a leadership change, that's why we said, let's get rid of this thing. So I went and told all the people around, in fact, the project prioritization team, they were sending proxies after a while because they didn't want to go to it. So I went and told all the people on their proxies, we're not doing this anymore. They're going, thank God. We don't want to do this anymore.
Well, that's gotta be
And-
frustrating too, to sit in that meeting that long and
Right.
figure out all the things, and then somebody came in and said,
Right. You
nope.
had the
Why do I do
expectation of
this?
saying, this is what we're going to do,
Yeah.
and then you have your expectations violated, saying,
Yeah.
nope, we're not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
And it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So we have because we're an engineering and production facility, so we've got a lot of small production projects that are small improvements, engineering changes.
Mhm.
So everyone's just like, well, it'll only take a day, it'll only take a week. Well, that's a week of time that you're taking away from my bigger projects,
Right, exactly,
And
yeah.
that's and they have their own prioritization scheme. They rate it, they chart it out. Mine is still I said, I'm still semi-new there and trying to develop something. And I need to figure out how to like mesh those in. But the problem with our new projects is somebody has an idea or a customer request. We don't know until the engineer starts working on it what the solution is.
Yeah.
So I don't have a value, I don't have, we don't know how much we're gonna sell it for. So like, I wanna be able to just, okay, here's our net income, here's, use some sort of financial to say, this is the most valuable product. I can't even get that, because I don't know what the solution is. So that's where we were trying to, what I was trying to do is kind of do like just a general rating of all the, because we got like, let's say 35 candidates, And so I would kind of say, okay, based on effort and value, here's the general rankings.
Yeah.
So none of them have numbers, just, this one, and kind of going that way. But then that's where we're running into, okay, I have priority 1 through 5 over here, okay? These are the most value and lowest effort projects. But then it's how do you coordinate with all of these over here, the engineering changes? Because we use the same resources. And my ideal solution would be get your own resources.
Sure. Well,
Don't always have that opportunity, right?
I know we had talked a lot at one of the Agile meetups that we host too about one organization factors into their projects. They only factor like 30 to 32 hours available for their team for that resource. They don't fully allocate that person for 40 hours.
Okay.
And then that bought them some time. I think in this scenario, that those individuals were also responsible for like support or something like that.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
if it changes your value rubric a little bit, right? Because, it impacts that value number. But if you don't allocate that person 40, then it saves you a day or, something like that to be
Where they
able to
could then
plug
work
in
on
those
something.
smaller projects. It impacts your value number, right? Because
Yeah.
that make your value number less, but.
Yeah, so a lot of times when we get a project, we don't have enough information, we just don't have how many hours it's gonna take. Either the vendor discovery or the discovery session didn't happen or it didn't happen well, or an executive said, hey, we're doing this, and the project starts and no one knows where we're at, or what we need to do. And so what I wanted to talk about is, how have others dealt with that? I'm sure prioritization and discovery is great, but sometimes you simply don't have that. You get the project and you don't have enough information, and you have to start from scratch, and you're scrambling for resources, and that's not ideal. That's not what we want, but that happens. It's reality. And so how have others dealt with that? Are there any groups that have dealt with that well, or are also sharing in that issue?
Well, if I don't have enough information, I'm looking first for who is the contact, the source of the project request, because that's where you're gonna find the information you need, is to just go back to the source.
Can I ask, do you not have information because they aren't able to get it? Like, is it like the scenario where like you just can't even get the,
You don't know what the solution is.
you don't even know what the
yet.
solution is?
Yeah,
Is it because of that? Or?
It's you don't know what the solution is. For an example, we have a project that's coming in, and we really don't have a solution at this point. So how figuring that out, and that may not be it shouldn't be a project at that point, but it is, right? So do you guys see that in your organization? Or
So
am
what we
alone
kind of
here?
did is, because we're still waterfall, so we got like a phase 0. So it's kind of like a pre-phase where we're trying
Yeah,
to
we
dig
do
up that information, but you still need resources dedicated because you still need, at least in my case, it's an engineer and a finance and a sourcing manager to figure out what it is that solution's going to be. And then you actually bring that back and say, okay, here's what we think it's going to cost. Here now we actually have a real value to it, and kind of re-evaluate that project. And then say either, okay, it's viable, or we're going to lose money on this. Let's not do it. So that's one way we've done it, is have like one more checkpoint in there where it's not just full steam ahead. It's, okay, wait, let's take a look at this again.
And we do the same thing.
We have a customer that uses proof of concept team. So they fully dedicate a group of resources. They're a big company, but they can fully dedicate a group of resources that only works on POC projects. And that team, I think there's 3 or 4 of them or something like that, has a technical component, a business analyst component, and then the business goes to them first, and it keeps it out of the PMO channels until they determine that from a POC. You might be able to do something like that on a smaller scale, right? They're a big company, but.
Do you ever have trouble like translating? So if your proof of concept team comes up with something and then you hand it over and they go, what, this doesn't make any sense, or?
Well, where I have heard that more is the proof of concept team comes up with something and the business will say, because that part's free. The POC team is free, right? And they'll come up with something, this typically in like an analytics scenario, and the business will go, oh, that's good enough, we'll just take that and do something with what they've done there, right? And they've really built it with, duct tape and a bunch of leftover hair ties, right? And they've got to piece something together, and the business will try to take off and run with that, and they'll say, no, right? Like if you truly want to do this and truly want to put this in an IT function, then these are the steps that they're going to have to take, and here's how you go about getting that approved. But they will only do true POC work, because I think that was their big struggle they had initially, is all of a sudden their POC team were investing 80, 160 plus hours into these, and they're like, whoa, these are no more than 40, proof of concept, spend the time, and then that came out of like a different budget pool than a true project. It was a cost of doing business kind of thing. But if you had even one person that could do that could just take any sort of, that wasn't allocated 40 hours to something that could take, and they're just budgeted for POC work. That's what this one customer of ours does.
So it sounds like our projects are quite different because we're a services delivery company, and so all of our projects are external to our customers. But just in case this gives any ideas, we do something fairly similar to that idea. We have practice, almost departments, and we have a practice lead in each department that's accountable for scoping projects with customers. And I won't even put tentatively resources on our calendar unless I have a statement of work. So I don't know if that's something that would make sense to do internally or not, but I could see that being a potential solution where they'll jump on a scoping call with the customer to get a way better idea of what they actually need after the deal is qualified. And then because they're a practice lead and they're a technical expert in that particular domain, or again, maybe it's only one person, they're able to at least come up with like an estimate of, like, it sounds like you're wanting an implementation, and typically when we do implementations it might be 20 weeks of work, and here are the phases, and until we have that statement of work written, at least as a draft, I won't even consider giving people dates, availabilities, anything. I literally have an email in my inbox right now that I just read the tagline of, where one of my sales reps is saying, like, hey, can you get this on the calendar? Even though we don't have the SOW. No, you cannot. My answer is going to be no, you cannot. Until I have a SOW to even tell me, like, I don't even know how many hours we think this project's going to take. Obviously, depending on the hours, there's times where we can schedule resources at the same time to work on it. Sometimes we can't. Sometimes it has to be concurrent or consecutive. And, until I have that, essentially like proof of concept or statement of work, I will not dedicate resources, and then I won't book those resources officially until we have the statement of work signed by both the customer and our delivery leader.
So that statement of work kind of functions as a charter.
Mm-hmm.
It's a kickoff point. Some of the pain we have is because of the pace of our business. We're very fast. Within 2 days of that being signed, we could have an engineer on next week. So where do you define those activities? Where do I find the time to get them in? Usually I'm engaging them with the customer, just trying to get the basic prerequisites. And we're supposed to have an internal planning call, but oftentimes I need to get them in front of the customer. So what we tried doing with one of the practices is we've implemented an onboarding week into the very beginning of the actual execution of the project, where we come in and we start to define, and I'm trying to get the engineers to, we're in a weird split where we're between waterfall and agile sometimes. Some projects are agile, some are waterfall, depending on, the needs of the project. So in that onboarding week, I'm trying to get them to sit down, create a work breakdown structure, break down that statement of work. The pain obviously is there's not enough information in the beginning, so that scoping from that statement of work can often change based on the outcomes of what we identify within that onboarding week. So I don't know if that's helpful. Like we've tried to come up with strategies of, well, where do we define the activities? We try to do it before we start. Maybe we can make a change order before we hit, but often we wind up, hey, we're at the door in the customer's room figuring it out. So.
And it primarily comes from having people who have done it before and have the expertise to be able to force the way when it hasn't been, because sometimes we do like product offering discovery and things like that. Meeting those people with the people who have requirements, putting those people in the same room, teleconference, and letting nature just take its course that way, where the ideas come up that way. So that's typically what we see.
Yeah, we're lucky enough that even though we work in many different subcultures across the U.S. and the customer's environment always changes, the enterprise environmental factors, the organizational process assets change all the time depending on where we're working. But the projects are always very similar. Our offerings are always similar. So we have the benefit of having analogous projects, having like a rough range, but we're still gathering data now that we switched over to Maven Link. So we'll mature, but same struggle.
What's your biggest struggle?
Pace.
Our timer's going to go off in just a second. Do you want to keep talking about this?
Well, actually, that's perfect time.
Okay.
Just my biggest struggle.
Okay. But I do want to hear the answer to that question. Okay. 10 more minutes.
So I think the biggest struggle, at least to me, we share similar struggles. I think within the admin team or the delivery operations team, it's just right now we're in a struggle where our backlog isn't full enough. So we don't have the ability, I'm not sure on prioritization, but it's like our pace of kicking off projects, taking that charter to planning to kickoff has gone to here. So we're trying to kick off with as much information as we don't have cleanly, and I think it's obviously causing some customer sat issues.
Now, do you have any experts within your company that are kind of like know a lot about a lot, and they could come in and you have to nail them down in terms of their time. They come in and they can take a look at a statement of work and saying, this is going to take this, it's going to take this, we're going to need these resources, it's going to cost this much.
So
Can
those
they
are the experts
score those pretty well?
they're the ones who write them.
They're the ones that write them, okay.
Yeah, so the experts that we have are the ones who actually write the statement of work.
Okay,
So
okay. And how accurate are they typically?
That's what's hard for us without Maven Link being implemented right now. We don't have the data, honestly, to even be able to tell, other than what's in my head, where like in our heads where like we remember where we know that we scoped this project at 400 hours, and based on my calculations of super manual time card entries where I'm literally copy pasting data into an Excel sheet, like I can tell that we're running out of hours, which is where again like a change order might come in, and then for fixed fee, impossible to know. We don't have a robust enough time tracking system right now to even have the data to see how well we are or are not doing on what was scoped.
Yeah, my off the cuff would be probably a 1.4 schedule index, like about 40% over an estimated is the worst I've seen for a project I will accept as. There's two I'm avoiding there that were just not great, but the 1.4 is probably the worst within a general set, not an outlier.
Now you guys have fixed fee contracts on those and you end up eating it after 400 hours from, okay.
Yep.
Any other questions? We're still on information. I can switch to another topic. We got down to the ones we voted on. We do have one left up there that got one vote. It is 8:30.
Oh, was it really?
Oh.
That did go fast.
Yeah. Unless you want to keep talking, you can talk amongst yourselves if you like. We try to end at 8:30 because we know that you work and you want to be able to get to work.
This is
So
great, this is like perfect.
This is very good.
timing.
if you have any more questions, great, please ask. Some of us will hang out for a little bit. If you're interested in doing a meeting like this again, let us know. We like to do, breakfast is usually a good time for this, but we could do other things. And I'd like to thank you for the ones that are brand new coming here today. We appreciate it. And if you want to get more involved with PMI, let us know. We have plenty of opportunities, and just took a PMP exam. You want to get PDUs? Oh, we got those. So thank you. Thanks for coming.